The military junta in Niger has rebuffed diplomatic attempts and mediation efforts by the United States. The initial contact between a U.S. official and the military junta was established through Acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Newland. Notably, the junta's leader did not engage directly. Instead, they dispatched another general for negotiations. However, the stubborn disposition often associated with military personnel prevailed, leading to the rejection of all overtures. They declined to establish a timeline for returning to democratic governance and dismissed pleas to avoid Russian engagement, despite their awareness of the risks posed by involving Wagner forces in Niger. Their focus remains unwavering, retaining power. This highlights the crucial importance of proactive U.S. communication prior to coup attempts, condemning oppressive regimes disguised as civilian authorities. Such regimes, with their repressive tactics against opposition and disregard for human rights, have eroded faith in democracy across Africa. The lack of tangible democratic benefits exacerbates this issue. People cannot fully embrace a system that fails to provide good governance, employment opportunities, or security. Consequently, a thirst for change, whether through military intervention or other means, emerges as an attempt to escape the status quo. However, it's important to clarify that forcibly seizing control of a government is condemnable and regressive. Such actions represent a symptom of underlying issues, a cause and effect scenario. Robust governance in countries where military coups have historically occurred could mitigate the impulse for such takeovers. Therefore, the United States should re-evaluate its approach to Africa. For instance, examining the flawed elections in Mali and Guinea reveals discrepancies. These events, where constitutional courts endorsed questionable elections, ultimately led to military takeovers. The United States' double standards are evident to many Africans, eroding its credibility across the continent. Discrepancies between their domestic and international responses are apparent. The vigorous response to the capital invasion stands in contrast to their milder stance on African leaders violating democratic norms. While Newland stated the withdrawal of aid, including military assistance, to a military government, these actions barely faze these military leaders, who prioritize retaining power above all else. The lack of strong condemnation from the U.S. during Nigeria's controversial presidential election reflects a pattern. Despite the approval of technological measures, Nigeria's Electoral Commission abandoned these safeguards, leading to alleged manipulation in favor of a particular candidate and party. The U.S. government, aware of these concerns through observers, both local and international, refrained from condemning the election, even extending congratulations. This perceived complacency indirectly supports a political coup, which may precede a military coup in the future, a process observed in Guinea, Mali, and potentially Niger. While the validity of the Nigerian election's outcome remains uncertain, the survival of the incumbent leader through a previous coup attempt raises questions. This narrative underscores the need for consistent international engagement to foster stable democracies across Africa. The United States must earnestly re-evaluate their approach to foreign policy in Africa. Otherwise, their relevance continues to diminish. A growing number of individuals no longer take their stance seriously. The effectiveness of engagement goes beyond monetary aid. Consider Niger as an example. Despite assistance from the EU, US, and other nations, the country's condition remains unchanged. Poverty persists, streets are dusty, and the dividends of democracy seem elusive. At this rate, progress may take centuries. Such circumstances lead people to believe in self-empowerment, diminishing the significance of U.S. influence. This is a key reason why many African nations turn towards Russia, perceiving equitable treatment from them. For instance, Traore's comments underscore how Russia offers assistance without imposing conditions, in contrast to Western nations. The delay in supplying helicopters and fighter jets to Nigeria during the Buhari administration illustrates the consequences of unequal treatment. Treating others as unequal partners and relying solely on financial support leads to backlash. People seek genuine emancipation, jobs that allow self-sufficiency, access to basic amenities like water and electricity, and proper infrastructure for economic growth. This aspiration stands in stark contrast to the extravagant lifestyles of politicians who ascend to power through questionable means. These politicians, driven by financial power, disregard the will of the people and manipulate their way into leadership positions, akin to a political coup. In fact, a military coup could be considered more efficient in comparison, given the resources expended on prolonged elections. However, it's important to note that stable governance would dissuade military interventions. If African countries witnessed good governance, military coups would lose popularity. A well-governed nation, where citizens see their resources utilized for their benefit, garners support. Conversely, corrupt leadership and self-enrichment schemes erode public trust. This phenomenon is exemplified by politicians like Tinubu, whose contested election victory led to conflict-focused priorities, revealing a disregard for the well-being of the people. The ineffectiveness of the U.S. foreign policy in Africa is evident, despite substantial financial contributions. This has diminished the U.S.'s reputation among many Africans who perceive double standards in their treatment. To regain credibility, U.S. policymakers should reconsider their approach. Treating all nations as equals and actively opposing oppression by civilian governments would yield more effective results. This approach avoids forceful interventions while promoting democratic principles and accountability. Waiting for failures and subsequent military interventions is less effective and more costly. Comparing military governments with civilian counterparts, it becomes evident that military regimes have delivered more infrastructural development in some cases, exposing flaws in democratic governance. Politicians often focus on frivolities and maintain bloated bureaucracies. The excessive cost of governance, illustrated by multiple advisors and ministers, squanders resources that could benefit the populace. This wasteful behavior undermines the potential of democratic systems to provide essential infrastructure and development. In conclusion, the United States must reposition its foreign policy in Africa to align with equitable principles and active support for democratic values. Treating all nations with equal respect, condemning oppression by civilian governments, and addressing governance inefficiencies are key steps to regain relevance and foster positive change on the continent. When comparing Nigeria's current state to that of 25 years ago, it becomes evident that government revenues and taxes have substantially increased in the present. However, this economic growth has not translated into a better standard of living. The cost of living has surged over fivefold, while the value of the national currency, the Naira, has significantly depreciated. Surprisingly, despite these financial resources, infrastructure has deteriorated. This raises the question of whether military dictators can outperform elected officials in terms of governance. Remarkably, a quarter-century ago, Nigeria boasted more robust infrastructure, facilitated in part by a dedicated fund for road development. Numerous roads were constructed across the nation. Today, many federal roads have fallen into disrepair, highlighting a decline in governance. Such a juxtaposition suggests that military leadership might excel in governance beyond expectations, even surpassing professionals from non-military backgrounds. The concerning aspect lies not solely in military coups, but primarily in the pervasive absence of effective governance. Elected officials often inadvertently provide military figures with reasons and opportunities to intervene. Effective governance acts as a deterrent, making military intervention highly unpopular. In instances of good governance, the public backlash could be so potent that even military intervention becomes unfeasible. For the United States, the imperative is clear. A strategic policy shift is necessary. Even if reputation concerns were disregarded, the substantial investments made to influence foreign nations underscore the value placed on international standing. Yet despite these investments, the desired influence often remains elusive, as exemplified by the ongoing situation in Niger. The pressure exerted by Western nations to close military bases underscores the complexity of the issue. This persistent pressure raises questions about Niger's significance and prompts a re-evaluation of policy effectiveness. In conclusion, the contrast between Nigeria's past and present underscores the multifaceted nature of governance challenges. It prompts a critical reassessment of governance models and international policies. The United States must recalibrate its approach to foreign nations, considering the intricate dynamics at play. The ultimate goal is to foster stable governance, prevent military interventions, and promote sustainable development, thus restoring credibility and influence in the international arena.